the biggest storyline coming out of the conference is the ongoing legal battles between Florida State, Clemson, and the ACC, and those two staple schools potentially leaving the conference. But amid the recent realignment rush, the ACC is expanding this fall, adding SMU, Cal, and Stanford. Florida State and Clemson remain the favorites to win the ACC, with Miami close behind. Brad Crawford joining me now with more after ACC Media Days. And let's start with the Canes, Brad, where Mario Cristobal begins his third season in Coral Gables after going 3-5 in conference play in back-to-back years. But this start of the season feels a little different with Cam Ward coming in. Brad, what do you think constitutes a successful season for the Canes?
It certainly does, Grace. And one of the biggest keys for me is this new look transfer portal laden offense has to find its rhythm early. There's a bunch of new pieces down there. Cam Ward, as you mentioned. Look, each of Mario Cristobal's first 2 years down there in Miami, he's had a rocky first half of the schedule. He lost 2 ACC games last year to start things off, started 2-3 in 2022. Well, the Canes this season, they open at Florida. They play USF and Virginia Tech all in September. So this program really has to win those games if it plans on, being a playoff contender, which is what the program expectations are this season with Ward, Damian Martinez from Oregon State, and some of those guys. So they have to find that offensive rhythm early, especially down there in Gainesville. And I think everything's in place for Cristobal to win big this season, but he's got to prove it can happen. He had a losing record his first year, 7-6, I think it was last season. So year 3, this is the tell-all, be-all for Mario Cristobal. And with as much money as Miami's NIL collective has put toward this roster, he has to win big, and it's got to happen now.
Another ACC school getting a lot of attention this offseason is NC State, and they've always kind of felt like a steady presence, so it was hard to believe. I saw they haven't won 10 games since 2002, and they haven't played in the ACC championship game since 2005. Those now feel like reachable goals. So what do you think is the biggest hurdle in accomplishing those goals?
They certainly do. I mean, there's a ton of hype in Raleigh right now. Dave Doran's had 4 9-win seasons at NC State, and he hasn't tempered expectations a bit this summer. He thinks this team can get to 10 or more wins this fall and get to that playoff. I have followed this program a long time, more than 2 decades, and I don't remember there being this much hype in July around the Wolfpack since, take it back 20 years, 2003, when they started top 15 with Phillip Rivers at quarterback. There's a throwback for you. So you have to like what NIL, NC State has done there in Raleigh. They really came together this offseason as a unit and really strengthened this roster. They went hard in the portal. Grayson McCall at quarterback, Duke's Jordan Waters. You see the schedule there. 2 very important games early. You've got Tennessee and Charlotte. That's a nationally ranked top 25 matchup. And NC State's ACC opener comes 2 weeks later in Death Valley. If they win that game, Grace, and start off 1-0 in the ACC, having beaten the Vols 2 weeks prior, then NC State's 4-0 and inside the top 10, and then these expectations go to another level. So NC State's a team that is in my preseason top 25, and certainly I think capable of getting to the playoff and winning the ACC.
Okay, I like that. And also, I'm a huge Phillip Rivers fan, so I appreciate that throwback. Yeah. But based on everything you've heard at Media Days, Brad, who is your sleeper team in the ACC?
Yeah, I think this one for me is based on what I haven't heard, and I'm very surprised Virginia Tech hasn't received more love this summer. I mean, really throughout the offseason, we have not mentioned the Hokies. They lead college football with 22 returning starters. That's the entire offense, defense, starting lineup right there. They're the only top 25 team preseason that we have that has to play 2 nationally ranked teams all year. That's it. One of those is Clemson in November, and they get the Tigers at Lane Stadium. We know how hard of an environment that is, especially at night. There's some NFL caliber guys back on defense. Antoine Powell-Ryland, 10 sacks, 15 tackles for losses. Kyron Drones at quarterback. So the schedule, in my opinion, is manageable. And whenever you're picking sleepers, Grace, you have to look at the schedule first, talent second, and I'd say coaching third. So they have everything in place now under Brent Pry to do really well. And I just think that as a whole, a media collective, so to speak, we are sleeping on Virginia Tech as a possible ACC title threat, and the schedule and the roster sets up for it.
Yeah, that feels really rare to return all 22 starters in this transfer portal era. That's a great stat. Well, I mentioned this at the top of the segment, Brad, but the biggest ACC storyline, and it kind of overshadowed ACC Media Days, you could feel kind of the tension there, is Clemson and FSU potentially leaving the conference. Now, the deadline to notify the ACC that they intend to leave the following year is August 15th. How likely do you think the move is for these two staples?
Yeah, the expectation based on what I've heard in Charlotte is FSU and Clemson are not going to try and depart August 15th. Now, if the Noles and Tigers really had it their way, they would be in another league altogether right now. But that grant of rights, I mean, that's the thing that is holding up in court right now. I do think FSU and Clemson eventually separate from the ACC. I just don't think the rumored jump to the Big 12 has serious legs. And in saying that, if Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark has his way and the league gets that private equity funding that has been rumored for the last month or so, then that could be the clincher, then sort of gets the Noles and Tigers to leap if they're able to win these lawsuits, as I mentioned. But, you know, ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips, he said this week in Charlotte, he made it very clear that his league, the ACC that is bigger than any one or two programs. I mean, he directly called out the Noles and the Tigers there. But I could see some hemorrhaging if FSU and Clemson successfully challenge that grant of rights. And I've been told programs like North Carolina, Virginia, they're both sort of in wait-and-see mode, and they're kind of watching from the back of the pack to see what happens with FSU and Clemson. If the Big 10, SEC, or Big 12 does get those two teams, FSU and Clemson, I don't see how the ACC can last, 3, 5, 10 years down the road.
All right, so the drama continues. Brad Crawford with the latest from ACC Country. Thanks so much for joining us. For more of Brad's work, head over to 247sports.com. Our national writers, our beat writers, keeping you up to date with everything you need to know about your favorite college football team and maybe your not so favorite college football teams. We got recruiting rankings, message boards, exclusive news you can't find anywhere else. It's 247sports.com.